shirt is. That's not good. All right. Wow. Yeah, we may need to order another one of these as well. It's not just. That's annoying. All right. See what we can do to stop that from happening. I think it's got to be recorded. I think we found the source of the I'm just going to sit down, not touch it. And I'm going to stand here hunched over so I don't.
Just set the microphone.
I did?
No.
No, this has to be here to pick up the sound. Yeah, and unfortunately, it's not good enough to pick it up from down here. Yeah. All right. Well, I think this is going to work. Let's open up our Bibles to John chapter 5. I'm going to have to look and see when Amazon is promising to deliver those things to me. I can't remember when I ordered it. You know, do you remember back in the good old days when you would order stuff from Amazon and it would come in 2 days? Those days are like long gone. I don't know why COVID got to basically stop that from happening, but ever since it's never been what it... It could be what it is. I have no idea. Too many people ordering, not enough people working, I'm not sure. All right, well, we went first of all, let me start before we look at the Bible. So you watched episode 4, and I thought the introduction was very interesting. It was a long segment without any dialogue. I know at least one time I was like, is my volume not working, or are they supposed to be talking? And then I figured it out that that was the style that the director was going with there. And I thought after I got used to it, it was pretty effective. I thought they told the story that they wanted to tell without using any actual dialogue. I knew because I'm a student of the Bible, I knew which 2 stories they were going to do from the introduction. I knew it was going to be the leper, or not the leper, the lame man by the pool of Bethsaida, and then I also knew it was going to be Simon the Zealot. Now, did anyone know what a zealot was before this episode? No, you didn't know what a zealot. So one of the disciples is called Simon the Zealot. Now a zealot. Well, what's somebody who's a zealot? How do we use that word in English? Well, if I say that someone is really zealous about their gardening project, what does that mean? Yeah, they're really into it, right? They're really, they're full of zeal. See, that's where the word is. The zeal. We know what zeal is. Zeal is like an inner motivation, right? It's like an enthusiasm. And so a zealot is somebody who is full of enthusiasm. So Simon the Zealot is an enthusiastic guy. But that title, zealot, kind of was known as, it wasn't just about, he wasn't just enthusiastic about life in general. He had a particular passion, a particular thing that he was really enthusiastic about. What was that thing? No, I could be enthusiastic about a hobby, but this guy, Simon the Zealot, was enthusiastic about something else. What was he enthusiastic about?
getting rid of the riffraff and
Not just the riffraff,
the enemies of Jesus, or enemies
Yeah.
of God.
the enemies of the Jewish people, primarily the Romans. Okay? I don't think that we can really we all know as people who study the Bible that the Jewish people were living under a foreign authority at the time of Jesus. But do you really know what that would have felt?
Would it be kind of like how the colonists felt about the British?
That's a good illustration of maybe how the colonists felt about the British. Sure, the colonists were they were very upset because they did not have any representation, and yet they were forced to pay all of these taxes. One of the things that really upset the colonists was the fact that they had to quarter British soldiers in their house. Okay? So that's kind of what the Jews had to do. They had to quarter Roman soldiers, not in their house, but in their city. Their city, their holy city, was filled with Roman soldiers. They lacked. So imagine, Steve, if let's say the state of Minnesota invaded the state of Wisconsin, and they take over the whole thing. Okay? So the state of Wisconsin is now occupied by Minnesotans. Okay?
Viking horn?
Yeah, with the Viking horns, yeah. And they make you not wear your Packers, they make you burn all your Packer outfits, and they make you wear a Vikings hat. You have to wear purple people stuff everywhere you go. No, but more seriously, you actually had to put in your house one of the occupying invaders, and not just put them up in your house. You'd have to, Steve, you probably have some extra bedrooms. You can probably do that. In my house, I'd have to kick somebody out of their bedroom. All right, a kid, I know this is your bedroom, but out, you go sleep with the other kids because this friendly Minnesotan is going to live here now. And guess what the friendly Minnesotan, wants to eat? All of my food. Do you think the friendly Minnesotan's going to do the dishes and pick up after himself? Have you ever had house guests where you celebrated when they left? Right? There's an old German proverb that says fish and house guests are the same. They both start to stink after 3 days. And that's about it, right? That's about how long you can tolerate having somebody in your house. When we were hosting international students, I don't think I anticipated what a big challenge that was going to be, to have a person living inside of your house, eating supper with you, eating breakfast with you, eating lunch with you, hanging out on your couch, just there in the house. They're not a part of your family, but they're kind of a part of your family, and it's just awkward. Okay? And now these Jewish people have Roman soldiers who are their enemies, who are mistreating them, abusing them, stealing from them, taxing them to death, and you have to look at them every single day. Okay? So Simon the Zealot is a man who saw all of the abuse that the Romans were handing out to the Jews and said, I'm going to give them some of that back. Right? Very feisty people, the Zealots were. Now, the Zealots, they are actually a historical group. Have you ever heard of a place in Israel called Masada?
Yeah, I heard of it.
Okay, what do you know about Masada?
No, they kind of barricaded themselves up there Until the enemy preached the thing, and then they jumped to their death, I guess.
Yeah, they killed themselves. All right, so the Masada is a big fortress up on a very high cliff that's almost impossible to get to. Well, the Zealots, not Simon necessarily, but his group, the Zealots, the best way I could describe the Zealots is they're like guerrilla warfare. No, they're small but fierce, and they fight dirty. Right? They don't fight like normal armies fight. They fight dirty. They do rotten, dirty tricks on people. Because they're so small, that's the only way they're going to ever have an effect. And so the Zealots actually, after Jesus died and rose again, the Zealots were basically really pestering the Romans and attacking them and causing problems. And so the Romans said, enough! They brought in all the armies, and they rounded up the Zealots, and they forced them to retreat into this hilltop, clifftop fortress called the Masada, which if you go to Israel today, you can tour the Masada. But the Romans were actually building a siege ramp. They were just basically getting dirt from all over the place and building a ramp of dirt and concrete and sticks and whatever, any garbage that they could get, because they were going to get their the door busters and the catapults and the things that they needed to break into this fortress and get rid of these people. Well, they are slowly but surely making progress on this siege ramp, and finally they are about to break into the Masada, and all of the Zealots kill themselves. Okay. So you can kind of tell a little bit about who the Zealots were. They were super passionate about their cause. They were willing to die for their cause. Okay? So now, does that make you think about Simon the Zealot as a disciple? Wouldn't that be interesting? Right? So you have this guy who absolutely cannot stand the Romans, who wants to fight a religious war to purify the Jewish religion. And Jesus calls him to be a disciple. Okay? Kind of like Matthew, right? An odd choice. An odd choice. The fishermen, right? Peter, James, and John, another odd choice. Fishermen are just kind of wild, loose, fiercely independent people. Not easily corralled. Not easily trained, right? And we see Jesus did struggle to train this rowdy bunch of men that he calls to be his disciples. I think it's just interesting to think about the background of some of the disciples. Now, we don't know a whole lot about Simon the Zealot, except for the fact that he was a zealot. That's all we know. Okay? We don't know why he became a zealot. The film kind of tries to give us some ideas of why perhaps he became a zealot. The film shows Simon basically seeing Roman soldiers beating on Jewish people, abusing their power. I don't know why this is, but there's certain kind of men, well, probably not just men, but women too, but a certain kind of person who, when they get into power, they just abuse it. You think about there's some police officers, or there's some prison guards. Right? There are some politicians. People who get some boss CEOs of companies. As soon as they get into power, they just cannot help but abuse it. And these Roman soldiers are probably a big collection of people like that. And so they have all the power, they have all the weapons, they have all the authority, and they're basically terribly abusing the Jewish people. And the Jewish people hate it. In the same way that you wouldn't enjoy the Minnesotan who's living in your kid's bedroom making you wear Vikings gear every time you walk out the door. Right? You'd be like, I don't like that guy. I wish he'd leave. What can I do to make him leave? How can I plot against him, right? How can I make his life so miserable that he wants to leave? Well, that's what the Jewish people were trying to do to the Romans, and of course it ultimately doesn't work. Anyways, that's Simon the Zealot. And so the other story that's in this episode is the healing of the man who was an invalid or a crippled person. Now, the Bible doesn't tell us how he got crippled. In the story, it shows him as a boy falling from a tree. Very plausible. That's very possible, right? That could be how it happened. And also the film shows how that guy, the invalid, is the brother of Simon the Zealot. Again, that's not scriptural. That's simply a part of the storyline. I enjoyed the storyline. I thought it was a kind of a fun twist on it, but not necessarily accurate to Scripture. But what is accurate to Scripture is the healing at the pool. Now, in the film, it shows or depicts Jesus like going there because he's looking for Simon, or not Simon, but the leper. In the film, his name is Jesse. I don't think we know his name in the Bible, but the film called him Jesse, and Jesus knows about Jesse and is going there to see him. Another thing that I appreciate, well, I'll ask you guys, did anything else strike you about this episode? I mean, it was an unusual opening with no dialogue. Something I guess I had never thought about before, but it's probably likely, it's definitely plausible, is as, shoot, I was going to have you look up something else too. All right, you can keep your finger in John 5 or find it again later. We're going to actually look up Leviticus chapter 23. So the disciples are celebrating, all the Jewish people are celebrating something called the Festival of the Booths. Have you ever heard of this before?
That's what they were calling.
The Festival of the Tabernacle, which is the same thing. So a tabernacle is a tent, fancy word for a tent, and a booth is a temporary shelter. Okay, so that's what this was. So let's look up Leviticus chapter 23. We'll see where this tradition came from. Actually, not so much a tradition as it is a command. Okay, Leviticus chapter 23 lists the various festivals and holy days that the people were supposed to observe. So we have the Sabbath and the Passover and the festival of the first fruits and the festival of weeks and the festival of the trumpets. And then in verse 26, that's the festival of atonement. That day is known as Yom Kippur. That's the day that the high priest put his hands on the scapegoat's head and transferred the sins of the people onto the goat, and then the goat is sent out into the desert. That's the Day of Atonement. But then next, in verse 33, is the Feast of Tabernacles. So let's read this. This is God is laying out to Moses all of the things that he wanted his people to do. The holy days they were supposed to observe, the way they were supposed to worship these feasts. So the Lord said to Moses, "Say to the Israelites, on the 15th day of the 7th month of the Lord's feast of the tabernacle begins." All right, it is normally at the end of September and into October. It floats like a lot of our holidays float. It's not always the same time, but So it's in that range somewhere. At the end of September, beginning of October, we would probably call it a harvest festival. Okay? That's what we would call it. But we'll find out why it's called the Feast of the Tabernacles in a minute here. So say to the Israelites, all right, we got the time there. It lasts for 7 days. So a Jewish wedding lasts for 7 days. A Jewish funeral lasts for 7 days. And this particular Jewish feast lasts also for 7 days. So when the Jewish people get together for a religious holiday, it is not something that's done quickly and then get on with life. It's a whole thing, 7 days. The first day is a sacred assembly. Do no regular work. For 7 days, present offerings made to the Lord by fire. And on the 8th day, hold a sacred assembly and present an offering made to the Lord by fire. It is the closing assembly. Do no regular work. Okay, so the beginning of the festival and at the end of the festival are special holy days where you don't work. In between, you can work. Okay, so even though it's a festival, you're still able to kind of get on with your day-to-day life, with this exception. You can't live in your house. Okay, let's keep reading. Verse 37 I am. These are the Lord's appointed feasts, which you are to proclaim as sacred assemblies for bringing offerings made to the Lord by fire, the burnt offerings and the grain offerings, the sacrifices and the drink offerings required for each day. These offerings are in addition to those for the Lord's Sabbath, and in addition to your gifts and whatever you have vowed, and all the freewill offerings you give to the Lord. All right, so basically this is saying during this festival you're going to be giving special gifts over and above your normal, regular tithe. Okay, so Jewish people gave a tithe, 10% of whatever they made back to the Lord. Now, the special feast, we do the same thing, kind of, don't we? I mean, in our church. So we have in your offering envelope box, there are envelopes for special holidays. There's a Thanksgiving envelope. There's a Christmas envelope. There's an envelope for all the different holidays of the church here. And there's also envelopes for other special things, like if you want to give to the debt, or you want to give to Christian education, or you want to give to the building fund, or Lutherans for Life, or lots of different opportunities. So what God is saying here is to his people, all right, guys, you guys normally give this much. Now, during this special festival, you're going to be giving additional offerings, and those are above and beyond what you normally give. All right, we got that. So, verse 39. So, beginning with the 15th day of the 7th month, after you have gathered the crops of the land, right? Like I said, this is a Thanksgiving kind of assembly. This is same time of the harvest time, after the harvest time. Celebrate the festival to the Lord for 7 days. The first day is a day of rest, and on the 8th day it's also a day of rest. On the first day you are to take choice fruit from the trees, palm fronds, leafy branches, and poplars, and rejoice before the Lord your God for 7 days. So you can kind of see where maybe some of the Palm Sunday stuff came from. They were already used to taking palm branches and other leafy branches and using them to celebrate. Okay? So that's what they're supposed to do here. Celebrate this as a festival to the Lord for 7 days each year. This is to be a lasting ordinance for the generations to come. Celebrate it in the 7th month. And here's the part where you can't live in your house. Live in booths for 7 days. All native-born Israelites are to live in booths, or tabernacles, or tents. So your descendants will know that I had the Israelites live in booths when I brought them out of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. Okay? This was to be a reminder to the Jewish people that who took care of them when they were wandering around in the desert for 40 years. And they did not have a house, and they did not have any property. God did. God took care of them. They lived in tents. They lived outside. They didn't have a house. They didn't have a palace, a structure. They lived in temporary homes that they had to pick up and move as they were directed. And so for 7 days, the Jewish people were to basically go camping in their backyard. And they still do that today. Like if you go to the city of Mequon during the Festival of Booths, you will see in the faithful Orthodox Jewish people, I'm just picking on Mequon because that's where there's a concentration of Jewish people that live there. Plus I also lived there for a time, so I got to see this. But the faithful Orthodox Jews actually live out in a tent in their backyard. Okay? And it's to remind them of how they used to live in tents, and it was still okay. God provided for them. Okay, that's the celebration that's going on here in John. Now I'll go back to John chapter 5. All right, that's kind of the background. The one thing I really do like about this series is it really forces you to dig into what the day-to-day Jewish life looked like. Not probably something we spend a lot of time on thinking about, but it's useful. I find it really useful because, of course, Jesus was a Jew, and he lived with Jewish. All his disciples were Jews, and they followed Jewish customs and habits. So it's good for us to know what those are. Okay, now chapter 5. Sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for a feast of the Jews. Okay? We happen to know that it was the festival of the booths. Okay, so the show shows Nathaniel. Remember, Nathaniel was an architect, at least in the show. Not in the Bible, but in the show, he's an architect. They show that Nathaniel is the one who kind of erects this kind of fancy shelter for them, for them to eat their evening meal in. Okay, so now there is in Jerusalem near the sheep gate a pool. And by the way, you can still go to the sheep gate in Jerusalem. It's still there, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda. Okay? Aramaic is the language that Jesus and his disciples most likely spoke. Now, the Bible is written in Greek, but they spoke in Aramaic. Kind of interesting, right? So when Jesus says, there's a couple of times when the New Testament actually records the Aramaic for us, but most of the time it's translated into Greek. Whatever Jesus said in Aramaic was translated into Greek and then given to us in Greek, and then it's translated into English for us to understand it. Okay, so it's called Bethsaida in Aramaic, and it's surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Here a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, the paralyzed. One who was there had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to get well?" Kind of an odd question, right? The answer should be fairly obvious. "Sir," the invalid replied, "I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I am trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me." Then Jesus said to him, "Get up, pick up your mat, and walk." At once the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked. The day on which this took place was a Sabbath. And so the Jews said to the man who had been healed, "It is the Sabbath, and the law forbids you to carry your mat." But he replied, "The man who made me well said to me, 'Pick up your mat and walk.'" So they asked him, "Who is this fellow who told you to pick it up and walk?" The man who was healed had no idea who it was. Remember, that's exactly what happened to Mary Magdalene. Jesus healed her, and she didn't know who he was. She had to find out later. For Jesus had slipped away into the crowd that was there. Okay, we'll stop reading right there. Now, what's the deal with this pool at Bethsaida? What's this stirring up? Was it a natural phenomenon like a hot water geyser? Very possible. Did it actually heal people? I don't know. I don't know that it did. I think it's kind of like people who claim that by going and sitting in a hot spring somewhere, they get some medical benefit from it. I mean, if you go down to Arkansas, Hot Springs, Arkansas, right? Right there in the title of the town. Hot Springs, Arkansas has all of these hotels that are built on top of the hot springs so that you can go into the basement of the hotel, and you have to, of course, pay money, but then you can go and sit in these hot springs. And people from all over the country go there because there are allegedly healing properties to sitting in these hot springs in Arkansas and other places where there are hot springs. So is it like that? I think it's like that. Now, the film, the movie people kind of tip their hand too. They seem to portray it as that this is more of a pagan, kind of a not Jewish, but like a superstition, like a different religion's teaching, not Jewish religion, but a different religion, and like a pagan religion, and again, more like a superstition. I don't know the answer to the question, but Jesus clearly doesn't take him down into the water to get his healing, right? He doesn't. Jesus says, "Get up." Okay? Jesus doesn't need magical waters. Jesus needs his word. That's how Jesus does miracles. And that's how Jesus continues to do miracles. So when Jesus says to his disciples, "Therefore go and make disciples, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit," that's what's happened. God is using his word with a little bit of water. And again, when you study baptism in Luther's catechism, we realize that it's not the water that's special. It's not the pastor that's special. It's none of that. It's a promise that God connects to the words of baptism. The water and the word together have a promise that says, when you do this, their sins are forgiven, the child is going to be born again, and a new life is going to be given to that child. So Jesus simply speaks to this man and heals him. Why did he heal him on a Sabbath? Because it's going to cause him problems. He said he liked to stir the waters, which is kind of a funny pun with the water being stirred in the pool of Bethesda, right? But we have a term for that. We call that stirring the pot, right? Poking the bear, right? So Jesus is basically kind of, not in the Bible, but in the show, says, I like to poke the bear sometimes. And he is poking the bear. He's poking the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Why? Just to get them upset? Just because he likes to be a troublemaker? No. Oh boy. Jesus does it so that he can point out to the Pharisees that they are fixated on man-made laws, and they think that that's how you're saved, and that's not how you're saved. So he's constantly reminding them that you need to let go of these man-made laws. So does the Bible forbid picking up your mat and carrying it home on the Sabbath? No. The Bible forbids what on the Sabbath in the Old Testament? Work. Okay? Work. But the problem is that the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the rabbis, the teachers, they all kind of got together and came up with all of these extra laws to make sure that Jewish people didn't break the actual law. Okay? Now, Christians do this too, okay? Unfortunately. We call them legalists. A legalist is somebody who likes to try and make a law about something that God does not make a law about. Okay? So, for example, saying that now this is becoming less common, but in the Baptist church, in the deep south, right, in the deep south of our country, the Baptist church, many Baptists would still say that you should not drink alcohol. Now, does the Bible forbid drinking alcohol?
No.
No. Does the Bible forbid getting drunk? Yes. So, it's logical what they do, right? What they logically do is say, okay, well, we're not supposed to get drunk, so the best way to not get drunk is to not drink alcohol, right? But that's what the Jews were doing, right? The Jews were like, okay, we're not supposed to work on the Sabbath. Okay, well, let's make sure that we define everything that we consider to be work. Okay, if you pick something up that's more than 16 ounces, it's now work. 15 ounces are good, 16 ounces you're sinning. And that's not actually a rabbinical law. I'm just making something up. But it's like, kind of like, I think about the Amish people, right? And they just arbitrarily said, okay, you are not allowed to dress in any clothes more modern than a pilgrim. You have to wear plain clothes. Well, okay, does God want us to dress respectfully and in such a way that we don't cause others to sin? Yes. He does. But does God say that women must wear skirts? That was another one, right? Maranatha Bible Baptist College is in Watertown, and Northwestern used to be in Watertown. And we would go to walk around town, and you'd see the Maranatha Bible girls. You always recognize them because they always were wearing long skirts. You still go to the Walmart in Watertown and do some shopping over there, and you'll probably bump into some gals wearing long skirts, and you know where they go to school, because they say, well, you're not supposed to dress immodestly. And that's true. The Bible says that we are supposed to dress modestly. But the Bible doesn't define what that looks like. So they take it a couple of steps too far. Well, that's what the Pharisees and the Sadducees were doing, and that's why they tell this guy who just got healed that he was sinning by picking up his mat and walking home. Jesus is poking the bear. He's basically forcing the issue so that he can basically correct their wrong point of view. All right, why don't we watch a little bit of the show? Let's see if I can get this back up. Anyone have any questions while I'm monkeying with the system here? Okay, well, now it's playing. Great. But it's not, I don't hear any sound. Sometimes